you should realize that Ethiopia has many different religious backgrounds, and it brings together the three Abraham traditions. First, there's a Jewish population in Ethiopia, not European or Caucasian or New York or whatever, but a Jewish population which probably goes back, at least mythically, to the Queen of Sheba, who was from the Ethiopian area and went to Jerusalem and met who?
King David.
Well, Solomon. And that may be where the Jewish population came from. Anyway, a lot of the Jewish population has since gone to Israel. In the 1980s and 1990s, there was an effort to help them relocate. The other religions, you already heard about the Christian. Does everybody know what was the first Christian nation in the world where a whole nation converted over?
Armenia.
Armenia. But who was second? A year or two after them was Ethiopia. The Christian populations now are split among various groups, including Roman Catholic. At one time, there was an effort to make everybody united with Rome, and that would have brought the Orthodox Church of Ethiopia into union. But the people really didn't want that. And in fact, one of the emperors there lost his reign because he had tried to do that. And so the Roman Catholic tradition, while there are some Roman Catholics, is primarily the Orthodox. The third group that's back to Abraham are the Muslims. And Ethiopia has a very old Muslim tradition. In fact, there were a group of Muslims that were having a very hard time in Mecca. And at that point, they asked Muhammad, that's how far back the Muslim tradition goes for Ethiopia. They asked Muhammad, what should we do? And he said, maybe you should leave. And he told them to go to Ethiopia. And they settled there, and there's some beautiful mosques there. And the population is supported by the Muslim tradition. Now, the Muslims split up, generally they're Sunni. But there are some Sufi, and there are also some Shia. So that's the second point, the religious tradition. The third point, up here, Haile Selassie. Everybody knows Haile Selassie, who's over 50. The Italians, back in the 1880s, had tried to take over Ethiopia. And they actually had agreements to provide arms. But the Ethiopians didn't want to have the Italians to dominate. The Italians tried, and what was the battle they lost? Yes. And the Ethiopians rallied, and they defeated the Italians. And that's one of the only times that the colonial powers were actually defeated by a group of people from that particular country that colonists were trying to take over. The Italians came back, though, and in the 1930s, they wanted to take over Ethiopia. And who did Haile Selassie, he had been the emperor for about 20 years, who did he appeal to? Everybody? Who did he appeal to for help? The League of Nations. 1935. And he gives a very famous speech when he goes there, asking the League of Nations to back him up. And what did the League do? Nothing. And if you want to trace, I'm making a connection here with Vietnam. The leaders that the United States had at the time of Vietnam include people like Johnson and Eisenhower before him. Those people had grown up in the 1930s and had watched what had happened when the League refused to help somebody that was asking for help. So Japan took over Manchuria, Italians took over in Ethiopia, and the League of Nations did nothing, and that's what then, unfortunately, some people feel led to World War II. Well, Haile Selassie, and that's the point I want to make right now, he ruled as an emperor, and he ruled up till 1974. And you know what did him in? What was happening in 1970, 74, 73?
Watergate.
The oil. The oil. And the prices of oil went way up. And the Ethiopians depended on the imports of oil, particularly the taxi cab drivers and students and people that needed to get around the country. They overthrew Haile Selassie. And he then was succeeded by Mengistu, is that how we pronounce it? And actually it was a regime that was allied to the Russians. And that regime only fell when? 1989 and 1990, when Gorbachev said that he was following new policies and they weren't going to continue the old ones. Well, the final point I want to make about Haile Selassie, he loved America. He loved our country. And he encouraged his youth to come to America and go to schools here. And there are thousands. And where is one of the biggest centers now, actually in the world, but one of the biggest centers in the United States for Ethiopians? Washington, D.C. And I have traveled in Washington. I've taken taxi cabs. It seems like the whole thing is operated by Ethiopians. Anyway, they've told me that there's over 100,000 Ethiopians in Washington. And there are restaurants there, and there are whole areas of the city that are actually Ethiopian. So, Haile Selassie, you see his flag up there? That flag, the colors are still used. What is the center symbol? Does anybody know that?
Lion of Judah.
Lion.
The Lion of Judah. So that's how we remember Haile Selassie. The flag is still used today, but they have a new symbol based on a star, and they don't use the lion anymore. Well, those are enough points about Ethiopia.